SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation. SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation.
Surf Excel Hygienic Clean කොරෝනා වෛරසය 99.9ක් විනාශ කරනවා. හොඳ වැඩවලට ඊට කොරෝනා වලට තිත.
Tonight, the right focus. In Parliament today, the Justice Minister outlined the many archaic laws targeted for amendment.
Currently, the Civil Procedure Code cost regulation is archaic, extremely low when compared to today's cost of litigation.
As opposition MP says, end impunity first.
When you have a scenario where impunity is so high, all of these amendments become meaningless.
Change in tactics. Nominated US envoy to Sri Lanka calls for a constructive partnership and a better use of financial tools to counter opaque investments in Sri Lanka. Money talks. Sri Lanka's envoy to Beijing announces Chinese interest in $800 million renewable energy project. No fair. The opposition files a fundamental rights petition in the Supreme Court challenging the US YUGADANAVI deal. All this and much more coming up on this Thursday, the 21st of October 2021.
හිරුගේ පළමු කිරණමෙන් රන්වන් බුද්ධි තිමත් සමකට.
Lever Aish Kaha Face Cream.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I am Shanella Fernando in your top stories for tonight. Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith presided over services at the St. Anthony's Shrine in Kochikade and St. Sebastian's Church in Katuapitiya today to commemorate 30 months since the deadly attacks that killed hundreds of worshippers. During his sermon today, His Eminence the Cardinal continued to express disappointment with the government's handling of the investigations into the attacks, accusing the government of self-preservation, which he says has brought down the curses of the attacks' victims.
A special prayer service was held at St. Anthony's Church in Kochikade this morning to mark the 30 months since the horrific Easter Sunday terrorist attacks. Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith presided over the service at one of the two Catholic churches that were struck by suicide bombings that day. During his sermon, His Eminence accused the government of reneging on its promise of one country, one law, and instead going out of its way to protect those close to them who have been deemed culpable through the investigations.
මේ වසරේ මාර්තු 8 වෙනිදා මා හමුවීමට පැමිණි එදා සිටි නීතිපතිතුමා මට කීවේ මේ සිදුවීම සෑහෙන දුරට සංවිධානාත්මකව කරනු ලැබූ සිදුවීමක් බවයි. එය ත්‍රස්තවාදීන් 7-8 දෙනෙකු කළ දෙයක් කියලා කියන්නට බැරි බවත් ඊට වඩා දීර්ඝ සැලසුමක් මේ ප්‍රහාරය පිටුපස තියෙන බව එතුමා මට සඳහන් කළා. දැන් මේ කොමිෂන් සභා වාර්තාව නීතිපතිතුමාට බාර දීලා මාස 9ක් වෙනවා. එළිදරව් කරන ලද වෙළුමේ නිර්දේශ ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙලා තියෙන්නේ බොහොම ස්වල්පයයි. විශේෂයෙන්ම ආරක්ෂක අංශවල උසස් නිලධාරීන් විමර්ශ යටගසන්නට සහ විශාල උත්සාහයක යෙදෙන බව අපිට දැනගන්නට ලැබිලා තියෙනවා. එක රටක් එක නීතියක් කියා පොරොන්දු වුණාට Tamanගේ අයට එක නීතියකුත් අනිත් අයට තව නීතියකුත් ක්‍රියාත්මක කරමින් තිබෙනවා. නීතිය බාරව ඉන්න අයත් මේ කුමන්ත්‍රණයේ කොටස්කරුව බවට පත්වෙමින් පවතින. තමන්ගේ හිතවතුන් චෝදනා ලැබූ විට ඔවුන් නිදොස් කොට නිදහස් කරන්න කටයුතු කරමින් සිටින අතර තමන්ගේ විරුද්ධවාදීන්ට වරදක් නොවුනත් දඬුවම් ලබා දීමට අදාළ උදවිය කටයුතු කරමින් පවතින. මේ තත්ත්වය තුළ පාස්කු ප්‍රහාරය පිළිබඳ කොමිෂන් සභාවේ නිර්දේශ ක්‍රියාත්මක කරගන්නට අපට මේ පරිපාලන ව්‍යුහය තුළින් ඉඩකඩ ලැබෙන්නේ නැති බව පැහැදිලි වෙලා.
In conclusion, His Eminence the Cardinal says that he believes that Sri Lanka's current wars are a punishment for the administration's inability to deliver justice to all the victims of the attack.
මේ විනාශය නිසාදෝ අපේ රටට ලොකු ශාපයක් උදා වෙලා තියෙනවා. හරියට නිකන් අහිංසක මිනිසුන්ගේ ලේ මුර දෙනවා වගේ ස්වර්ගයට. ඒ වරදට වැරදිකරුවන් වූ අයට විරුද්ධව ඒ අයට මේ රට ඉදිරියට ගෙන යන්නට බැරි වෙන විදිහට ඒ අයටත් ප්‍රශ්නයක් බවට පත් වෙලා.
Meanwhile, another special service was also held this afternoon at St. Sebastian's Church, Karuapitiya, the second Catholic church attacked 30 months ago, and the hardest hit of all locations targeted by the extremist group.
මිලියන 18.8 නිවස ලක්ෂ 5ක් ගෙවා දැන්ම වෙන් කරවා ගන්න මල්බෙරි රෙසිඩන්ස්.
Addressing the United States Congress before her confirmation as the next US ambassador to Sri Lanka, Julie Chung, who was nominated by President Joe Biden, has called for a better, more constructive relationship with Sri Lanka due to its strategic location in the Indian Ocean. Chung also says that the United States must also look at increasing the use of its available financial tools to counter what she termed opaque and coercive lending practices currently being used by Sri Lanka.
Foreign Service Officer Julie Chung, nominated by US President Joe Biden as his next envoy to Sri Lanka, has said that the United States needs to build a constructive relationship with Sri Lanka due to its positioning in a strategic location at the heart of the Indian Ocean. During a congressional hearing on Wednesday, Chung told members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that location and its critical ports offering access to global maritime lanes and trading routes plays a pivotal role in a free and open Indo-Pacific architecture. She added that this reinforces the necessity for the United States to build constructive relationships, including with civil society, the private sector, and the Sri Lankan people. Chung also told Congress that if confirmed, she aims to work tirelessly to advocate for quality infrastructure and investment based on transparency, respect for international law and good governance, which is mindful of sustainable environmental and labor standards. She also called for more support for US companies doing business in Sri Lanka and for the utilization of tools such as the US Development Finance Corporation and the Export-Import Bank to provide alternatives to coercive lending and opaque contracts. Further referring to the sinking of the MV Express Pearl cargo ship off the coast of Colombo a few months ago, Chung added that US humanitarian assistance, emergency response capabilities, and environmental surveillance tools helped Sri Lanka respond to the tragedy and is emblematic of how the US can be a positive force and a strong partner to the people of Sri Lanka. Chung also promised to, if confirmed, commit to speaking clearly and consistently in support of democratic values, human rights, and a strong civil society, which is essential for democracies and central to the US foreign policy approach. In conclusion, she stated that the US must also be strong partners in encouraging justice, accountability, and reconciliation so that all Sri Lankans can share in the benefits of peace, security, and prosperity.
The China National Energy Engineering and Construction Company Limited, a Chinese state-owned energy conglomerate, has offered to invest $800 million on 400 megawatts of renewable energy projects in Sri Lanka. This was communicated to Sri Lanka's ambassador in Beijing, Dr. Palitha Kohuna, when he visited the KE electric plant in Shuazhuang that produces a range of equipment for the generation and distribution of electricity. KE Electric has been named as the main equipment supplier for the proposed CNEEC project. During his visit, Ambassador Dr. Kohona explained the Sri Lankan government's policy to generate 70% of the island's electricity needs from renewable sources by 2030 and also outlined possible locations that the government of Sri Lanka has earmarked for these projects. Ambassador Dr. Kohuna also reiterated the Sri Lanka government's intention to seek out investment rather than loans to finance such projects. It was also revealed that the China National Energy Engineering and Construction Company has already begun doing preliminary work on potential locations in Sri Lanka and is also in the process of preparing its proposals. The main opposition Samagi Jana Balawege party has filed a fundamental rights petition in the Supreme Court seeking to nullify the proposed share transfer of the YUGADANAVI power plant to US company New Fortress Energy. The petition claims that the deal was approved by the cabinet without considering the damage to Sri Lanka's national security and economy, which is a violation of the fundamental rights of the people.
The YUGADANAVI power plant deal that was signed between the government and US company New Fortress Energy took a new turn today, with the filing of a fundamental rights petition in the Supreme Court by the main opposition party, the Samagi Jana Balawege, looking to challenge the transferring of shares. The petition was filed by SGB General Secretary Parliamentarian Ranjith Madhuma Bandara, who has named Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, the Cabinet of Ministers, West Coast Power Private Limited, the US buyer New Fortress Energy, and the Attorney General as respondents. With that, the petition says that the decision by the cabinet to transfer 40% of the YUGADANAVI power plant's shares held by the Sri Lankan government to the US company cannot be justified in any way. It also alleges that the cabinet had not considered the impact to Sri Lanka's national security and its economy in arriving at this decision. Further, the petitioners points out to serious concerns over the transparency of the share transfer process as well. On this basis, the petitioner claims that the cabinet decision to go ahead with the share transfer without any feasibility studies was a violation of the fundamental rights of the Sri Lankan people. Hence, the petition has called for the Supreme Court to nullify the share transfer decision taken by the government. Meanwhile, a second fundamental right petition was filed against the YUGADANAVI deal, and what it alleges is a monopoly that is being created for the LNG gas supplies to the country. The petition was filed by the president of the National Rights Organization, Venerable Bengamuwe Nalakathera, Dr. Gunadas Amarasekara, and Dr. Vasantha Bandara.
More news on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.
Big 3.
Welcome back in more news. The bill amending Article 53 of the Penal Code was passed in Parliament today, which means no one under the age of 18 can be sentenced to death for a crime. Also, the cost regulations that come under the Civil Procedure Code were passed in Parliament today, as Justice Minister Ali Sabri said were a much-needed update to archaic laws. In response to the Justice Minister's statement on these amendments, Ahila Ilange Tamil Congress parliamentarian Gajendra Kumar Ponnambalam called for the government to focus on the bigger matter of concern currently, which he says is the culture of impunity being promoted by the government. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa arrived in Parliament today with the chamber due to debate several amendment bills, including on matters pertaining to the release of fertilizer ahead of the Maha season. Parliament proceedings commenced with time allotted for questions.
හදිසි රසායනික පොහොර දහනම ඊළඟ කන්නේ විනිෂ්පාදනය අඩුවීමේ අනිවාර්ය කරුණක් වෙනවා. සමන් ධර්මකීර්ති පාංශු සරුබව සහ පෝෂණ කළමනාකරණ පිළිබඳ මහාචාර්ය එතුමා කියනවා නැනෝ යූරියා පිළිබඳව ඒක කාබනික පොහොරක් නෙවෙයි. ඊටාම මිලාදිකයි. ලීටර් 2.5න් ලැබෙන්නේ නයිට්‍රජන් ග්‍රෑම් 100ක්. ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම ගොයන් ගහට අවම වශයෙන් කිලෝ 50ක් අවශ්‍යයි. මේව ගැන ලංකාවේ පරිශන කරලා නැහැ. අලුත් නිෂ්පාදනයක් නිසා පරිසරයට විය හැකි හානි පිළිබඳව තොරතුරු ලෝකෙත් අඩුයි. නැනෝ පොහොර සඳහා SLS ප්‍රමිතියකුත් නැහැ. කාබනික කෘෂිකර්ම සඳහාවන SLS ප්‍රමිතිය නැනෝ නිෂ්පාදනය අනුමත කරන්නෙත් නැහැ. නයිට්‍රජන් ප්‍රතිශතය මේවා තියෙන්නේ 104යි. මේක පොහොරක් නෙවෙයි. මේක ශාක වර්ජක උත්තේජකයක් කිය. මෙහි ඇති යූරියා ප්‍රමාණය අනුව කෘෂිකර්ම ලේකම්තුමා විසින් පවසන ආකාරයට අක්කරයට මිලිලීටර් 250ක් යෙදුවොත් අක්කරයටම ලැබෙන්නේ යූරියා ග්‍රෑම් 23යි. යූරියා ග්‍රෑම් 23කින් අක්කරයක් වගා කරන්නට පුළුවන්. වාණිජ නිෂ්පාදනයක් ලෙස ඉන්දියාවේ එළි දක්වා තවම මාස දෙකක්වත් නැහැ. ඒ නිසා මෙහි ගුණාත්මක භාවය පිළිබඳව ඉන්දියාවේ ගෝයිනුත් දන්නේ නැහැ. මේ කරුණු දිහා බලනකොට ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම මේ නැනෝ දියර පොහොර වලින් ඒ බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන නිෂ්පාදන උත්තේජකය ලැබෙනවද නැද්ද කියන එක බරපතල ප්‍රශ්නයක්.
මේ කෘෂි කර්මාන්තයේ රසායනික කාබනික කියලා දෙයක් නැහැ. ශාකයේ ඉල්ලන පෝෂ්‍ය ගුණය දෙනවා නම්. දැන් ඔබතුමාගේ පක්ෂ නායක කාර්යාලයෙම ප්‍රෙස් එකක් තියලා කිව්වා ලංකාවට පොටෑසියම් ආනයනය කරා මේක රසායනිකක් කියලා. ඔබතුමා ඒ ළමයින්ට කියලා දෙන්න ඔබතුමාගේ පාර්ලිමේන්තු මන්ත්‍රීවරුන්ට ඒක khනිජයක් පොළවෙන් ගත්ත දෙයක්. ඒක රසායනික නෙමෙයි. මේ නැනෝ නයිට්‍රජන් මේක තමයි ලෝකේ අලුත්ම තාක්ෂණය. යූරියා මිටියකින් කරන එක මේක ලීටර් භාගයකින් කරන්න පුළුවන් අපිට. ඒ නිසා පොඩි අඩුපාඩුකම් තියෙනවා වෙන්න පුළුවන්. අපිව නැහැ කියන්නේ නැහැ. අනියත බියක් ඔබතුමාලා ඇති කරන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. අපි නියම වෙලාවට ගොවියට පොහොර ටික දෙනවා. අපි මේ 30 වෙනිදා වෙනකොට පොහොර සියල්ල ගේනවා. ඒ දෙන පොහොරවල වගකීම අපි ගන්නවා. ඒ නිෂ්පාදනය යම් අඩුවක් වුණොත් ඒකත් ගොවියට ඒ වන්දිය ගෙවන්න අපි කටයුතු කරනවා.
Meanwhile, the bill amending Article 53 of the Penal Code was passed in Parliament today. Accordingly, under the new amendments, a person under the age of 18 can no longer be sentenced to death for a crime.
Currently, the Civil Procedure Code cost regulation is archaic, extremely low when compared to today's cost of litigation, as the monetary value of the rupee has depreciated in a great deal over the time. Therefore, I appointed an advisory committee to pay attention to this area and develop and provide a draft scheme of cost of litigation in a timely and reasonable way. The proposal was sent to the Legal Draftment Department for finalizing the working draft, and thereafter we published the same on the Gazette Extraordinary extraordinary on the 2nd of July 2011 when he taxed in the costs in a civil matter between clients and the registered attorney to bring it into the current level and make it practical. Everything else has appreciated and the value of the rupee had been depreciated. Accordingly, what we are trying to do is to give a meaningful, current and practical amount of money so that will prevent frivolous litigation on the part of people who are seasoned litigators, as a result of which genuine matters which had to be resolved in the courts are getting delayed.
We are in agreement with regards to the direction in which these amendments have been suggested. These are being brought in a piecemeal way. There is an amendment that is being suggested for the Code of Criminal Procedure. We also know that there have been further amendments tabled for the Code of Criminal Procedure. When there are certain amendments that are definitely going to be brought with regards to the same law, I think it is only correct for those to be brought together. These piecemeal sort of amendments also runs the danger where connected laws can be missed out.
However, the Ahila Ilangai Tamil Congress parliamentarian added that the government should focus on what he termed a culture of impunity prevalent in the country, which he says is the bigger concern in the country's judicial system.
The fundamental question that concerns the Sri Lanka's judicial system is a question of impunity. If you have a justice system, the whole point of that justice system is to create conditions of justice, not to allow impunity. But the tragedy, and I'm not blaming just this government, I'm blaming all governments, even the previous one, impunity is at its height. And when you have a scenario where impunity is so high and so rampant and almost encouraged, then all of these amendments become meaningless.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa called on the officials of agrarian services to do the right thing by the country even if the challenge may seem near insurmountable. Speaking to the officials, the head of state highlighted that with the goal set towards a greener country, officials must come together with dedication to achieve the target. In a virtual meeting with officials of the Agrarian Services Department this evening, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa pointed out that the purpose of the country's goal of heading towards green agriculture is not just aimed at a couple of seasons, but for generations to come. During the meeting, the President stated that measures have been taken to provide farmers with imported nano-liquid nitrogen fertilizer and release funds for incentives and basic allowances the farmers are to receive.
මේ හරි දෙයක් කරන එක විශාල අභියෝගයක්. හැබැයි ඉතින් අපි ඒ අභියෝගයට මහුණ දිය යුත්තේ ඒක තමයි හරි දේ හන්දා. නිවැරදි දේ තමයි අපි කරන්නට ඕන. ඉතින් ඒක අපි ගොවි ජනතාවට ගෙනියන්නට ඕන, තේරුම් කළ දෙන්නට ඕන. අඩුපාඩු තියෙයි. ඒ අඩුපාඩු හොයාගැනීම හරි ගස්ස ගන්න. පාරම්පරිකව අපි මේව කරපුවා. මේක පහසු නෑ, ලේසි නෑ. මේක අපි ජයග්‍රහණය කරන්නට ඕන. පරිසරය ආරක්ෂා කරගන්න ගමන්ම, සෞඛ්‍යයත් ආරක්ෂා කරගන්න ගමන්ම අපිට අවස්ථාව තියෙනවා වැඩි ආදායමක් ගොවියට ලබා දෙන්න. මේක තමයි අපි අපේ බලාපොරොත්තු අනාගත පරම්පරාව වෙනුවෙන් කැප වෙලා මේ කාරණේ කරන්න ඕන.
For the first time in 5 months, 5,059 schools resumed lessons today for primary sections of schools with less than 200 students island-wide. However, even though some schools saw an enthusiastic return of both its students and teachers, there were many schools that saw low turnout from both.
Sri Lanka's 5-month-long school closures ended today. Hence, school primary section with students under 200 reopened today in accordance with the phase plan devised by the Ministry of Health and announced by the Ministry of Education. As such, students of 5,059 schools returned to classrooms today under the first phase.
අපිට අධීර 4ක් තමයි සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශයෙන් දීලා තියෙන්නේ. එක අධීරයක් තමයි ශිෂ්‍ය සංඛ්‍යාව 200ට අඩු පාසල්වල ප්‍රාථමික අංශ. දැනටමත් පටන් අරන් අවසන්. දෙවෙනි අධීර ශිෂ්‍ය සංඛ්‍යාව ඉස්සලම කිව්වා වගේ 200ට වැඩි පාසල්වල ප්‍රාථමික අංශ හා ශිෂ්‍ය සංඛ්‍යාව 100ට අඩු පාසල්වල සියලුම ශ්‍රේණි. තුන්වෙනි අධීර සියලුම පාසල්වල 10, 11, 12, 13 ශ්‍රේණි සහ මුළු ශිෂ්‍ය සංඛ්‍යාව 200ට අඩු පාසල්වල සියලුම ශ්‍රේණි. අධීර 4 සියලුම ශ්‍රේණි සඳහා පාසල් විවෘත කිරීම. මේ සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශයෙන් අපිට දීලා තියෙන නිර්දේශ. කෙසේ වෙතත් පවතින සාර්ථකත්වය සහ වසංගත තත්ත්වයේ මත අනාගත සමට වෙනස් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. දැනට අපි සූදානම් වෙලා ඉන්නේ මේ ආකාරයට තමයි පටන් ගන්න සූදානම් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
Despite today's reopening, turnout at some schools was positive. However, in others, students and teachers preferred to stay home. In other developments, the vaccination drive targeting children aged 18 and 19 years of age commenced island-wide today. The program was initially launched as a pilot project in the Colombo district. Director General of Health Services Dr. Asila Gunawardana said today that the vaccine drive for children will be further expanded to include 16 to 19-year-olds from tomorrow.
එම එන්නත් කරන වැඩපිළිවෙල කුමන පන්තිද කුමන වයස් කාණ්ඩවල අයද ඉස්සල්ලා එන්නත් කරන්නේ කරන්නේ කියන එක අදාළ විදුහල්පතිතුමාත් කලාප අධ්‍යාපන අධ්‍යක්ෂකතුමාත් දිස්ත්‍රික් සෞඛ්‍ය සේවා අධ්‍යක්ෂකතුමාත් ඒ වගේම අදාළ සෞඛ්‍ය වෛද්‍ය නිලධාරීන්වත් එකතුව කුමන පාසල්වලද ඉස්සල්ලාම කරන්නේ ඊළඟට කොයි පාසල්ද කියන එක කාලසටහනක් අනුව ඔවුන් විසින් සකස් කරනවා ඇති. එම කාලසටහන අදාළ සෞඛ්‍ය වෛද්‍ය නිලධාරී වෙත ලබා දුන් පසු ඔවුන් අවශ්‍ය එන්නත් කරණය සඳහා අවශ්‍ය කණ්ඩායම් පිටත් කරනවා ඇති. මේ සඳහා අවශ්‍ය එන්නත් ඔග ප්‍රධාන වසංගත රෝග ඒකකයේ මගින් මේ වන විටත් සෑම දිස්ත්‍රික්කයකටම ලබා දීලා අවසන්. අපි මේ ලබා දෙන්නේ ෆයිසර් එන්නත මේන් අපි ලබා දෙන්නේ එක මාත්‍රාවක් පමණයි.
However, the Director General of Health Services added that students won't have to cross provincial borders to get their vaccines at their respective schools. Instead, he added that they could get the vaccine by visiting a school in the area they reside in after showing proof of their school admission.
The Supreme Court has ordered the Inspector General of Police to carry out an investigation into the recent incident at the Anuradhapura prison involving State Minister Lohan Ratwatte. The order was issued when the fundamental rights petition filed by 8 prison inmates against former State Minister of Prison Management and Prisoners Rehabilitation Lohan Ratwatte were taken up for consideration before a 3-member bench comprising Supreme Court Justice Kamini Amarasekara, Yasantha Kodagoda and Janak De Silva. During proceedings, the court granted permission to take up the petition for hearing and issued the interim order. The Commissioner General of Prisons was also ordered to transfer the petitioners from the Anuradhapura prison to another prison to ensure their safety. After considering the facts presented, the court postponed the case to the 15th of February 2022. The emergence and spread of the Delta Plus variant in 27 countries has prompted Sri Lankan health officials to urge people to be more mindful about their behavior this time around due to a possibility that it may be more vaccine evasive. Director General of Health Services Dr. Asila Gunawardana said today that the health guidelines need to be followed thorough until at least December, until 70% of the country's population have been fully inoculated.
Since the onset of the third wave until September 27, the island had constantly reported cases in the excess of 1,000. This was due to the more transmissible Alpha and Delta variants of COVID-19. However, of the two variants, the Delta variant had dealt the most damage after it became the dominant variant in the country. In early September, the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura confirmed that 96% of the country's infections were caused by the Delta variant. However, through an island-wide curfew and a successful vaccination program, the country's cases are now declining. Nevertheless, health experts had expressed concern over the emergence of the Delta Plus variant, which has been identified in 27 countries. Even though the Delta Plus variant, a subvariant of the Delta strain, has so far not shown a higher transmissibility, experts say that it contains mutations that may give it survival advantages. However, since the Delta Plus variant has not been categorized as a variant of concern or a variant of interest by the World Health Organization, why is it a cause for concern?
There is another new variant, lineage from Delta variant, that's called Delta Plus, spreading around in some of the other countries, started in Britain, and a few countries have reported it. Even though Sri Lanka has not yet reported this Delta Plus variant, there is a possibility that Delta Plus or any other new variant surfacing and spreading in the country. The best way to avoid this situation is to stick to COVID appropriate behaviors. Otherwise, we might face another wave of infections. We got it wrong twice in the last 1 year. If you can remember, last December, there was one wave because of people were shopping around the country, disregarding all the guidelines. And again in April, this happened because people were going around the country, disregarding all the health guidelines.
පෙර අපි කිව්වා අපි හැමෝම නිවාඩුවක් ගත කළ යුතුයි. නමුත් තාමත් ඒකට අවස්ථාව නෙවෙයි. ඒ නිසා තමන්ගේ ගෙදරම රැඳී සිටිලා මෙම නිවාඩුව ගත කරන්න කියලා. නමුත් බොහෝ පිරිස් මෙම සංචාරක ස්ථානවලට ගොස් තිබුණා. ඒ වගේම බොහෝ පිරිස් අඩුම ගානේ මුවාවරණයක්වත් නැතුව තමයි එම ස්ථානවල හැසිරුනේ. ඉතින් මෙහෙම ඇත්තටම හැසිරෙන්න ගියොත් අපිට තව රෝගීන් වැඩිවීමක් අනිවාර්යෙන් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්න. රෝගීන් වැඩි වුණාට පස්සේ අපිට නැවත වරක් අනවශ්‍ය ලෙස සීමාවන් පනවන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා. මෙම පුරුදු අවම වශයෙන් දෙසැම්බර් මාසයේ අවසාන වෙනතෙක්වත් අපි දැඩිව පිළිපැදිය යුතුයි.
In the meantime, the Sri Jayawardhanapura University's Allergy, Immunology and Cell Biology Unit Director Dr. Chandamaji Vandara said that the Delta Plus variant has not been identified so far by the lab. However, Director of the Health Promotion Bureau Dr. Ranjit Batuantudava says that this does not rule out the possibility of the variant already being in society.
Lanka IOC has decided to increase the price of octane 92 petrol and auto diesel with effect from midnight today. Accordingly, the price of octane 92 petrol has been increased 5 rupees per litre, while auto diesel has also been increased by 5 rupees per litre as well. LIOC said it has increased its retail selling prices for both diesel and petrol by 5 rupees each due to huge losses on sales of both the products. However, the prices of Lanka Super Diesel and LP95 have been kept unchanged. With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanella Fernando. Have a good night.